dark, kindle the spark in me. I want to start today's episode of Flicker with an odd choice for what is basically walking through the Sermon on the Mount through Matthew's Gospel, and that's to take a quick detour through one of my favorite Dr. Seuss books, If I Ran the Zoo. The opening lines of this childhood classic goes like this. "It's a pretty good zoo," said young Gerald McGrew, "and the fellow who runs it seems proud of it too. But if I ran the zoo," said young Gerald McGrew, "I'd make a few changes. That's just what I'd do." And the whole rest of the book, the whole rest of this Dr. Seuss classic is imagining how things would be different if this title character were in charge of the zoo. What sort of critters would be in it? So instead of plain old regular lions and tigers and bears, Dr. Seuss just lets his imagination run wild and has his kid zookeeper imagine all sorts of creatures from all over the place and says, this motley crew, this amazing gathering, this menagerie of surprising and unexpected creatures from all over, this is what I would gather if I were in charge of the zoo. I know it's a little bit weird, but I want to suggest that what the Beatitudes are, what the sayings we get from Jesus that are blessed are the poor, blessed are the those who mourn, that these are sort of Jesus' where God runs the zoo kind of statements. These are descriptions of here's what it looks like. Here are the kind of people God particularly focuses on, gathers on. Here are the folks God calls beloved and chosen and precious, even if the whole rest of the world says they don't matter. So we've talked so far about how while the powers of the day say things like, well, if you don't have enough money, you don't have enough wealth or power or prestige, you can't be important, so you're not anything important at all. And Jesus says, no, blessed are you who are poor, blessed are you when you are empty-handed. That's exactly where God likes to start. Or blessed are those who are brokenhearted. Jesus, we saw last time, isn't saying it's morally superior to be sad, but when your heart's broken, the God we meet in the scriptures is particularly invested in wiping away tears rather than patting folks who are proud and successful on the back. God is always looking for those who are brokenhearted, who are lowly, who are told they're not good enough, not acceptable. That's how God runs the zoo, except as Jesus sees it, the zoo is the whole universe. The way God runs the universe is different than what the powers of the day tell us really matter. And that comes into even sharper focus in the next sentence of what we call the Beatitudes. Jesus says, blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. And in a sense, just like we saw before with the other statements of the blessing that Jesus says in these Beatitudes, this shouldn't exactly come as a surprise for folks who've read anything that comes before in what we call the Old Testament or the Hebrew Bible, because Jesus is actually quoting a line from the Psalms about the meek inheriting the earth. And God has always sort of had this thing for lifting up the lowly, the quiet, the not recognized, but that runs completely counter to the way the world sees things, right? I mean, the conventional wisdom. I mean, here's every self-help book and business success book around is you got to make a name for yourself. You got to be a big talker. You got to be able to make everybody think you're a big deal. And if you talk yourself up enough, you can be a success. Even if you don't have the substance, if you get people to believe you're a big enough deal, if you get people to think you're important, if you just get people to sort of latch on to the idea that you're important, you will be. So project it, be confident, be bold, be loud, go out and demand the things that you want out of life and you'll get them, right? If that isn't conventional wisdom for the American dream, I'll eat my hat. And Jesus says, counter to that, just like all the prophets and the laws before that in the Old Testament said, that's not how things work where God runs things, where God runs the zoo or the universe. God is always looking out for those who are too timid, too meek, too quiet to speak up, or those who have been silenced so their voices aren't heard. I mean, Again, Jesus doesn't treat the Beatitudes the way we sometimes do. Jesus doesn't see these statements of blessing as character traits for being morally superior or behaviors that will automatically get you good rewards in the world. Jesus is saying instead, these are the kind of folks that God is looking out for, and it's not about rewarding good moral behavior. So Jesus isn't saying it's necessarily morally better to be meek and quiet and shy. It's not necessarily better to be a wallflower at the junior high school dance instead of going up and asking the girl to dance that you want to dance with. Jesus instead is saying, for the folks who are too quiet, or the folks who are gentle, or the folks who are timid and a little bit shy about things, don't you worry. Don't you worry. You don't have to make a big brash noise about yourself. You don't have to go grabbing folks' attention by telling people how great you are. Instead, God is at work always looking out for those who are the wallflowers, the meek, the gentle, the quiet. It's okay. This isn't about praising weakness as better than strength. It's more about, again, saying, here's how God runs the show. You want to know what kind of strange, delightful, blessed community God gathers together? It's the folks that everybody else treats as not good enough, not valuable enough, not important enough to notice. And yet God, out of the corner of the divine eye, has always been noticing and never lets us go. See, at the heart of our faith, I'm convinced, is the idea that God is always the one asking us out on the dance floor anyway. So much of the conventional wisdom about how you get success in life is you got to be the one to take the shot. You got to make the first move. You got to be the one bold enough and brave enough and audacious enough. You've got to take those steps. You've got to grab all you can, right? The old Schlitz beer slogan was you got to grab all the gusto you can in this life because you only go around once. And by contrast, the followers of Jesus dare to try. What I mean to be quiet, not loud, not and I'm the shy, bashful wallflower afraid to step out onto the dance floor. God is the one gracefully always taking us by the hand and looking at you and me and saying, may I have this dance? The Beatitudes are statements first and foremost about who God is, and only secondarily about who we are. So it's not that you're supposed to be quiet and timid or else, but more to say, God is the sort of God who is always looking out for the ones who are the wallflowers, who are overlooked, who never got picked first for the team at kickball at recess, and says, I pick you. And when you get that those are God's priorities, then we become the kind of people who will pick the ones who aren't picked, who will look out for the people who are sitting by themselves in the lunchroom, who will pull people out into the great dance of community in the Christian life and say, you belong too. That's what this is all about. That's what it looks like where God runs things. That's what it looks like where God runs the zoo. So hey, join us next time for more conversation as we work our way through the sayings of Jesus we call the Sermon on the Mount here on Flickr.